Now, a big story today, the defending SEC champions, the Alabama Crimson Tide, they rolled in this morning on the third day of SEC Media Days. And you already know, today in this special edition of 48 Now, I am joined live with 48 Sports Director Carl Prather. Carl has been at SEC Media Days at the Omni Hotel in downtown Dallas all week. Carl, thank you so much for joining. This morning, you listened to Coach Kalen DeBoer at his very first SEC Media Day at the helm for the Crimson Tide. He's certainly got some big shoes to fill, taking over for, of course, the legendary Nick Saban. How much urgency would you say he showed today to continue the Alabama football legacy that Saban built over the years for the program?
Hey, good afternoon, AJ. Good afternoon, North Alabama and the Tennessee Valley. You mentioned it, a sense of urgency. You know, the one thing about Kalen DeBoer being around Coach DeBoer since January when he was formally introduced as the Alabama head coach, a sense of ease with Kalen. I think he's obviously intense. I think we've been so accustomed to Nick Saban and his intensity and wearing that on his proverbial sleeve. But I think that obviously, as we all know in college football and all of life and athletics, there are numerous ways to kind of accomplish the goal, right? And I think Kalen's approach is going to be different, and I think his demeanor is going to be different. I think he wants to win at the highest level. I think he's a fierce competitor, but you may not see that relative to what we've been accustomed to with Nick Saban. So the urgency was there with Kalen today. But it was the same Kalen DeBoer that as diehard college football fans that watch nationally have been accustomed to when he was at Washington. A very sense of calmness there with Kalen. So very at ease. Did not really seem to have kind of the fiery demeanor relative to what we've been accustomed to with Coach Saban. But he wants to win. It's a different way in his approach, but nevertheless, he understands the task, he understands the goal, and he understands kind of the Alabama standard and what's, more importantly, what fans have wanted and fans of the program have wanted for over the last 20 plus years, and then some national championships, SEC championships, and competing at the highest level of college football year in and year out.
Very interesting. Certainly sounds like a different approach there. Today you also heard from quarterback Jalen Milroe, offensive lineman Tyler Booker, and DB Malachi Moore. After listening to those players speak today, what would you say is the overall message or the mantra surrounding the heart of this Alabama team this year?
Yeah, AJ, togetherness. For those that remember, you know, it was a very hairy 24 hours after Nick Saban formally announced his retirement. And in that time, there were a number of players testing the transfer portal waters. And to see these three young men here representing Alabama, representing their brothers within the program, the biggest mantra that I've just kind of, and the word that I mentioned is togetherness. Tyler Booker actually mentioned earlier today that he wishes all of his former teammates well. Caleb Downs, now the starting safety at Ohio State, and Julian Sayin, a talented five-star prospect, made his way to Ohio State as well. We've had a lot of defections. I see a Bond now, the one of the starters in the rotation for Texas and wide receiver. But Tyler just mentioned it. They want to win a national championship. You mentioned Malachi Moore. He's the only player, or one of the handful of players still on the roster that won the last national championship at Alabama, and Malachi was a freshman. And Tyler mentioned that he wanted, and this group wants to win a national championship. Jalen Milroe comes back. Tyler Booker, one of the better offensive linemen and guards in the country, he returns. You remember J.C. Latham actually transferred to Iowa, back to his home state, to then transfer back to Alabama just a little over 45 days or so ago. So the one big positive and the one big meaning in saying that I will just continue to say from my standpoint today, just togetherness. This group is a very tight-knit group of brothers, and it definitely will show for sure, not only today, but as they head into fall camp here at the end of the month.
Very cool. And I definitely want to talk about this offensive line. Earlier you mentioned Tyler Booker, of course. Probably, in my opinion, Alabama has one of the most solid and experienced offensive lines in college football. But how much of an impact would you say that interior will be this season, especially when it comes to Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, and running the football?
Yeah, and with Justice and Jam, highly touted guys coming in a year ago. I think Jam Miller probably was expected to have more of an impact last year. Didn't quite live up to fruition, come to fruition rather last season. But let's just say that those two guys will indeed be in the rotation to be able to run the football. I think it obviously helps when you have a guy like Tyler Booker, a guy like J.C. Latham, some other guys that may be kicked out at tackle on the other side of that. You have the Brockmeyer, guy or player rather that could potentially be in that rotation as well. So, I think that's one of the strengths of this team potentially if they can kind of solidify the other side of the offensive line and tackle. The interior, I think, will be okay. I think it also helps when you have the legs of Jalen Milroe to help that offensive line to be able to maybe kind of extend plays, more importantly, run things to the perimeter to kind of suit what Jalen Milroe wants to do. I think that is indeed a strength. I will say that I think that one thing that's kind of maybe lost in the fact that, life after Saban, I think that people may forget that Alabama still has a talented roster, right, AJ? And I think that people may forget that there's a lot of 4-stars and 5-star guys that had to kind of wait their proverbial turn over the last 2 seasons, now being able to step in to the forefront and be able to make an impact within their own right. So I'm interested to see who will be next. Who will be the guys that will kind of carve out their own proverbial niche, and who will be those guys that we may not hear a lot about as we head into fall camp, but as we get into the end of September, some of these guys will be household names that we may not have been accustomed to.
Very true. I definitely want to talk about Milroe as well. Carl, there's no doubt in my mind the Tide certainly can run the football. Strong backfield, strong interior. But would you say they have done enough this offseason to add more weapons for Milroe at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, good question, AJ. I think that's TBD. I think when you lose a guy like Amari Niblack and who's at Texas now, and including Isaiah Bond, fans remember Isaiah catching the 4th and 31 against Auburn in the Iron Bowl to end the game a year ago. He really made a significant impact the last 4 games or so of the year. He's now at Texas. I still think that there are some unknowns there at wide receiver, basically names that we haven't heard. The name that, of course, Alabama fans are literally clamoring just to get a glimpse of and to see as he joins the team and enrolls and heads to camp is Ryan Williams, 5-star wide receiver, one of the top 2 or 3 players in the class of 2024 from Saraland High School down on the coast of Alabama, down in Mobile. He can go flat out get it, folks. World-class speed. For me, in my opinion, being here for over a decade, one of the 2 or 3 best prospects within the state of Alabama I've ever seen, which is high praise considering that the likes of Julio Jones have been in this state down on the coast as well. But I think that Ryan can kind of give them an instant impact there. And they're asking maybe potentially a lot of him to be able to get him into the fold. But I think he is as good as advertised, and I think we'll all be able to see that as we head into the upcoming season. But AJ, overall, for Jalen Milroe, for me, I think the weapons will be there, but I think he's going to have a special season. I do. I think that Jalen, from everything that I've been told from spring, just is really just bought into what Kalen DeBoer is offering. For those that are new or familiar with Coach DeBoer, he was the head coach in Washington, and he had a quarterback by the name of Michael Penix, who was a first-round draft pick. I think that some of the skill set that Michael can have relative to Jalen, Jalen has maybe a little bit better legs than Michael. Michael may throw it a little bit better as far as his deep ball accuracy, but overall, I think that Jalen Milroe will be able to benefit immensely from Kalen DeBoer and what he likes to do as a play caller in his offensive system. So overall, I think Jalen will have a special year. I think he'll rip it up, to be brutally honest, in a positive way, and I think that the weapons that we don't know about, we'll eventually know about, and as we get into the midpoint of the year.
And Carl, before we move on to some of the other teams you heard from today, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. You listened to Malachi Moore, like you said earlier. I saw he was actually wearing a cowboy hat today, which was pretty cool. How much of a leader do you think Malachi will be for this defense this season?
AJ, I had a cowboy hat myself. I got one here too. I wore it on our Tennessee Valley Living show earlier this week. So yeah, I have my Stetson, my Clemback black hat as well. So they may make another appearance tomorrow. We'll just have to wait and see. But as far as Malachi goes, yeah, true unquestioned leader on defense. Has been a leader for quite some time. Kind of one of the anchors of the defense alongside his teammate Deontay Lawson in the middle of that defense. Two outstanding, talented players that will be playing on Sundays for sure next season. Yeah, Malachi has really kind of, especially discussing Kalen DeBoer, just impressed with just his different approach. And I think defensively across the board, there are once again players that you may have heard of over the last two recruiting cycles that you may have forgotten about, but I think that you'll hear a lot more about them as they head into this upcoming season. One thing to note for fans that may forget, obviously with the new staff, there's new staffers, new assistant coaches. One of those defensive coaches is Kane Womack, and Kane Womack was a sitting head coach at South Alabama, now the defensive coordinator for the Crimson Tide of Alabama. New system, new scheme that he will run this year. It'll be a 4-2-5 type base set. For those that may not be familiar with that, basically will be 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers in the middle, and then you'll have 5 hybrid corners, safeties that will be able to play in the box, be able to get down and run support, and be able to cover in space out on the perimeter as far as the passing game goes. So I think it'll be a little bit of adjustment because you got to remember the last 3 cycles plus. And Nick Saban had a system, ran a nickel-type format there for the Crimson Tide. So I think there'll be a few growing pains early on. But I think as we kind of get into the middle of the year, I think the defense will be solidified. This will benefit, to me, Deontay Lawson, be able to help in run support, be able to cover in space as one of the 2 two linebackers there in the middle of the field. And then, of course, with Malachi Moore, who's a thumper, he's good enough to be able to cover in support back on the passing game, but able to help in run support as well. So, once again, transition and change can be good. It just may take a little bit on that defensive side of the football for that team and that system under Kane Womack to kind of come together as they head into the football season.
And Carl, you also sat in today for Florida, Mississippi State, and today's SEC newcomers, the Texas Longhorns. Carl, could you talk a little bit about the Burnt Orange? What are some of your takeaways today from Sarkisian and company?
Yeah, AJ, just the confidence. We mentioned it about Kalen DeBoer and kind of his quiet confidence, the way that he goes about his business. Steve Sarkisian was impressive today and gave an immense amount of respect to the Southeastern Conference as it is before Oklahoma and or Texas officially have entered the league. But make no bones about it, he mentioned it several times throughout meeting with the media today. He has a ton of respect, but he fears no team. He believes that his team is capable of winning an SEC championship and returning back to the college football playoff. He mentioned numerous times that this is his most talented team that he's had on the 40 acres this year, and rightfully so. You have a signal caller in Quinn Ewers that will return to the fold under center. You have a backup in Arch Manning, who they may have the best quarterback depth in the country within that quarterback room in Austin. And then, of course, across the board at wide receiver with, as I mentioned, the aforementioned Amari Niblack, Isaiah Bond back with this program after transferring from Alabama. There is speed galore, including a 5-star talented prospect in Ryan Wingo, who was part of the class a year ago that can flat out fly as well. So he's loaded on offense, may have one of the best 5 or 6 offensive lines in all of college football as well. Looking for a running back to replace Jonathan Brooks, who was drafted in the NFL draft a year ago. And then on defense, Anthony Hill Jr. is one guy that you can keep an eye on as a true sophomore. He had a big impact in that game in their win over Alabama a year ago. The back end, maybe a little, may have some work to do, but they have a talented junior that returned back for his senior year at corner. He's here in the house today. But overall, the confidence of Texas being equipped to be able to enter into this league, understanding that depth matters, Injuries happen, but more importantly, being equipped and being able to compete week in and week out within the Southeastern Conference. Very, very impressed with what Steve Sarkisian had to say today, and he seems like, along with his team, that they are willing and able to compete with the big boys in the SEC as they try to potentially return back to a college football playoff and beyond.
And moving on to Mississippi State, former Oklahoma offensive coordinator turned MSU head coach Jeff Lebby spoke today. Do you think the Bulldogs could be one of those sleepers this year, or do they still need some time to adjust to that new system?
Yeah, that's a great question too, AJ. I think a lot of it has to do with the transition. I think that obviously it would be naive for any of us to believe we know what Mississippi State is and will be. We understand, if anyone can kind of follow the history and trajectory of Jeff Lebby and what he's accomplished in his career, offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, loves to spread it open. He's going to throw it. He's going to stay with what he likes to do as far as aggressively stressing the perimeters of defenses. But it's one of those unknowns. We really just don't know. New staff there. And let's just be honest, the Mississippi State program as a whole has kind of went through a transition phase within their own right. You got to remember Coach Arnett dismissed after last season. Prior to that, Coach Arnett also having to replace the late Mike Leach. So just a lot of turnover, a lot of transition for the program in Starkville. We shall see what Jeff Lebby is able to just establish in year one. Listen, no one's believing that Mississippi State is going to win a national championship, a college football playoff, or contend for an SEC championship. Well, what I think fans of college football and within this league would like to see is just what foundation is set heading into this season, and as you kind of make the transition with recruiting another offseason and heading into the 2025 season, just to see what this looks like under Coach Lebby in Starkville.
And the Florida Gators, they certainly have a lot to prove this season following back-to-back losing seasons under Coach Billy Napier. What do you think the Gators and Napier need to do to get back to their winning ways?
The unbelievable kind of quote-unquote mantra that's really been just the scuttlebutt, as I like to say, from all media members here this week. It's just been hot seat. And is it fair? That's for you to decide. But ultimately, it's almost like the talk surrounding Billy Napier in Florida has all been centered around his job security. We really hadn't heard much about just his team. And to be brutally honest, as far as your quote-unquote first teamers or your first-line players, they got some really good talent across the board. A lot of people, remember Graham Mertz coming from Wisconsin 2 years ago and were like, Graham Mertz, can he be able to produce at the level necessary for Florida to become a contender? And he was one of the better quarterbacks in the league last year. You're starting there, and then you try to figure out what else is around this program and guys that can make impacts to be able to get this team back to their winning ways. He had a lot to say regarding his job security and the continued process that he is still believing in as they head into the 2024 season, AJ. For our viewers in North Alabama and the Tennessee Valley, Coach Napier, 11-14 in his first two seasons in Gainesville. Just brutally honest, just not going to get it done for the expectations that Gator fans and the Florida football program are expecting year in and year out. So I think the two biggest things, whether we like it or not, it was his job security that was discussed ad nauseum throughout this week, and more importantly today amongst the media, and then more importantly, getting off to a good start. Yes, the first 4 games of this year before he goes into a bye week with the Florida Gators are paramount. It could be one of those things, if you start out 4-0 and you're white hot, it could really carry some momentum going into your bye week. What happens if you're 3-1? Okay, what happens maybe if you're 2-2? Heaven forbid, what happens if you're 1-3, you get into October and they're making a change? We don't know that. That's why we have to play the football games. But what a way to be able to kind of quiet some of the proverbial doubters in Gainesville and beyond. If you can get a big win inside the swamp, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, against a Miami Hurricane teams that a lot of people across the national landscape of college football believes could not only win an ACC championship, but potentially be a dark horse to win the head to the college football playoff in the new 12-team format. So it It would be a big coup if Billy Napier can kind of set the tone for the season with a big win against Miami at home on August 31st.
No doubt about that. Well, Carl, thank you so much. As always, it was a pleasure, and it sounds like you're having an awesome time, especially today, filled with so many storylines. But make sure you all tune in to tomorrow's Before the Four, as I'll be speaking with Carl again about the Auburn Tigers, as well as Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. Carl, thank you so much.